Welcome back to the Bladtcast. Joining me now is Chris McLernon, who will tell us all about his current band that he has, Canal. They have a great new album called Crash, Burn, Repeat, and a single that's out. We'll talk about all that and so much more. Welcome to the show, Chris. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you about your career and the new album. I stopped myself from calling it a new record, but you can kind of do that again. It's you're able to call them records again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I think the people who are going to look at this, certainly the genre, know records were the first time around.
Right.
Which makes me sound like, I was, I had a pet pterodactyl or something, been around now.
Yeah, right. Your first releases came out on those cylinders that went to the Victrola with the big earpiece.
Yeah. Edison Studio, in New Jersey. Yeah, those wax cylinders.
For people that are watching us live right now on Wednesday, the 24th of May, I wanted to comment on, and I had mentioned this to Chris before we started. I heard about the passing of Tina Turner, who is one of those, I think people throw around the word icon a little too easily, but I think that she certainly has that status, the stuff with Ike and Tina in the 60s, but then, on through what was that? Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and and even that was 30 years ago. You know what I mean? So it's like a career that just continued to go, and obviously a different genre of music, but it's hard to not be able to have a moment to pay your respects to somebody who has, of course, accomplished so much as Tina Turner did.
Yeah, absolutely. I was lucky enough to meet her once, and she was very gracious. And it's one of those showbiz things where you just, hey, you're in with a bunch of people, and I picked her out. I was like, oh, that's Tina Turner. So I'm very extroverted. So I just walked up and said hi, and she was, like I said, very gracious. I didn't take much of her time because, she's Tina Turner. But she didn't, like I said, kind of iconic status where they don't have to give you the time of day at all. They could have just kind of, talk to this guy, or whatever. But she was very nice. And she actually by proxy gave me a really good professional tip from her days, I think with Ike, but it might've been later, where the thing she always did with her hair, that was to dry her hands off, because having a towel on stage looked unprofessional. So that's how she dried her hands off, was she rubbed them in her hair. So I stole that from her.
That's a great note. And besides, I mean, you don't want to do the whole robe thing like James Brown did. You know what I mean? Like that's his. Nobody else gets to do that.
Exactly.
If James is doing. That's fascinating. I never really thought about it. And of course it's so practical.
Right.
You just have to figure, even when you're established and having a decent enough career, you're still going to be playing in places that are so hot that there's nothing you can do.
Oh yeah. And when you're playing a gig, and most people who haven't, and which this isn't to sound snarky or anything, but when you haven't played on a stage like that, you don't realize, let's say in her case, there could be 25,000 people, they're facing you and they're breathing your way.
Oh yeah.
So you're getting all that CO2 for one, and two, all that heat. And then you got the lights, and you that idea of being professional and like, hold on, here, let me just throw the towel away. No, this is not a boxing ring, so it's, come up with something, make it look a little arty farty and part of the show. And okay, now my hands are dry and the mic won't fall out of my hand.
Yeah, that's how, as just a concert goer, you've gotten to the show early if it's a small venue and you walk in and go, oh, it's cold in here, but that's just because it's going to get so hot. One of my favorite small venues, and it was practically tiny, was when I lived on the East Coast. There was a place called Maxwell's in Hoboken, New Jersey, and the bands had to walk through the back of the crowd to get to the stage, and then climb off the stage and walk. So I once saw this band, Rocket from the Crypt. They're a San Diego band. They were around for quite a while, and they didn't want to do that. So they're like, we're just going to lay down on the stage and pretend that we got off. So you cheer for us and call for that. And I was just like, yeah, I can't imagine, and I think, and it wasn't like, big bodyguards came with the bands, and probably some performers who were there, but in general, the bands just walked through the audience and you kind of got out of their way.
Oh yeah.
So
there's a place in Houston like that. And the Houston, oh God, I remember there was one of the few places I was standing on stage and just kind of go, oh, everything kind of flashes before you.
Sure.
But yeah, it was so hot you had to walk from the stage all the way through the club, which was like walking through a sauna, and then turn around and walk the other way. But we did something similar. Saigon and Kick that did a couple of times. We're like, we're not going to go off stage and pretend, we're standing behind the curtain and we can't hear you. No, we'll just pause for a minute and then we'll start the encore, right? And they're
right. Yeah, exactly.
Poor theatrics,
Yeah, I know. And sometimes, especially if you're playing in a city where they have a curfew, it's like we don't have time for all that, It's instead of that, let's get one extra song in as part of it.
Right, yeah. The one we haven't played yet that you all came to see, yeah.
Right, exactly. Now, obviously, I want to talk to you about Cannell, but I was going through all the notes that I was putting together for you, and like with so many musicians that I talk to, the early part of their career has a stop dealing with Kiss, and you were part of a tribute band called Cold Gin, and that roster included current Kiss guitarist Tommy Thayer, and then his bandmate from Black and Blue, Jamie St. James. So was this a full makeup tribute band? Oh, yeah. And were you only doing the 70s stuff? Because this, when was this? Was this like late 80s that you were in Cold Gin?
90 to 91 and 92. Okay. Jamie called it because we were quote a tribute, but we had started doing it because as musicians do for their birthdays, they throw parties. So there'd be communal gear. The four of us would always get up. Mark Farrar would get up too. He was our guitar player in Cold Sweat, and he was in Keel. And Anthony White was our drummer in Cold Sweat, and he did Paul Stanley, so he played guitar as well. But everyone would get up and jam. But with the four of us, that combination, we just kill these Kiss tunes. It was just really good. Yeah. So okay, you know what? It's LA. We're all between records. Let's just go play a couple of gigs. And this is T-shirts, jeans. Just playing the song, sounding good. All right, we play. It was a Memorial Day weekend. Jamie says, "You know what? I think we should put on the makeup." And I was like, "Saint, that's all we got." He's like, "We don't have those costumes or anything." I don't care. We're either going to be the heroes or the goats, and I'm not being a goat. I was like, "Oh God!" So we put the makeup on, and just wearing T-shirts and jeans. Looks okay, but the crowd goes crazy, and all of a sudden, we started getting more people coming. So we're like, okay, let's modify the costume, and maybe it's not T-shirts and jeans anymore. And then we finally just sat down and said, you know what? Let's just go for it. Let's pick an affordable way to do the costumes, which is alive, and use Jamie and Tommy's resources with Gene. Not get a cease and desist, which we did sign something just in case they want us to stop. We would. But then it went from that playing birthday parties to we sold out the Celebrity Theater in Anaheim, which is in the round. Yeah. And talk about a place where you got to go to the stage. We didn't realize there's no way to get to the stage. So we're backstage in in the mezzanine or whatever. Yeah. And we're like, the stage is down there. We're up here. What do we do? How do we get to the stage? How do we get off? So I'm looking at Saint. I say, here's what, tell the lighting guys to just do that chase, you can do where you just see the sweep all over the arena. I said, at the last minute, at the end of Kissin' Time, which was the intro, have them just train it on the door, because we'll see that the lights come through the door. They hit us, and I kicked the door open and did the big Gene, that sort of thing. Place goes bananas. I'm like, holy shit, there's 3,000 people here. What have we got? We're dressed like them. What have we got ourselves into? But that was a landmark show because Gene heard about that. I was like, okay, you're too big. You're too big. You can't do theaters. No, you can't do it. No, let's go back to the clubs. It'll be fine. And I'm like, dude, this is your thing. You thought of it. I'm not going to fight you. But yeah, it got out of control. But Tommy Thayer was and still is, I think, with Kiss, the secret weapon. He's the quality control they all trust and count on. He's always just dead on with his execution, and he's a fan. And he translates the vibe of it as well as anyone could. And like Bruce Kulick, I love, great guitar player, but they didn't want him to be ace. And I didn't think he would be ace. Whereas Tommy can do it. And it's like, if you're Hamlet, Ace Frehley's the role. Let's bring in the right actor to do it. And it was Tommy. By the way, I just compared Ace Frehley to Hamlet in case anyone's listening out there. Sure, why not, right?
Yeah, no, I think, hey, there's tragedy in both stories. But
and comedy.
Yeah, I saw Ace a couple years ago in the LA area up at a place called the Canyon Club, and he was doing the entire '78 solo album. And he had said that I think it was early in that tour, And there were a couple songs that he had literally never played since he'd recorded the album. So it was like, all right, so, get ready. But it was great. Yeah. And, it's great that he's still out there and, getting to see Kiss on the never ending farewell tour. But
I think we've seen that. That's a theme, really. That I saw the Scorpions on the farewell tour in 2000, and I think it was 10.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the record was, of course, the Who did a farewell tour in 1982. So
that's I saw that tour. You're right. I saw that tour. So Milwaukee. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So no, it's great that they're still out there, and I've actually I've gotten to know a couple of the guys in a Kiss tribute band that have been around for about 20 years in the Cleveland area, and it's all like with Gene and Paul's blessing right until it's not. It's like it's all okay right now. Right. And if they do ever actually retire, and then there's just the official Kiss is basically a tribute band, all of a sudden they'll just be that one, Right.
But, and they'll be cherry picked. Yeah. Gene's favorite phrase when it comes to that is the lawyers are going crazy. It's got to stop.
Yeah, the lawyers are going crazy because Gene called them, and it's always great because anytime Gene comes up, pretty much everyone has a story of Gene, and you always do the voice. My favorite is. I've talked to him about this a couple of times. I kind of make him tell me the story. I've talked to Mark Slaughter from Slaughter a couple of times.
Yeah.
And when he talks about how when they were opening for Kiss on the Hot in the Shade tour in 1990, Gene was meeting Mark for the first time. Right. And, it'd be like, I don't want to talk about Vinny. I don't have anything to say. It's great to see you. And then within 30 seconds, but I also hated when Vinny did that, and it would just like, it would turn into, it would devolve into a Vinny Vincent bashing.
And because Gene doesn't want to talk about Gene until it's time to talk about Gene, and everyone's got a story about that, and he's just so in your face about it, and it's great. And he not just doesn't apologize.
No.
Which is that's half the fun, I think, to me. He just no, I don't know what you're talking about. Wait, what was that again? I don't sound like that. Do it again. I can't hear you. I don't sound like that. What?
Right, exactly. It's one of those big characters that you need in rock and roll, of course.
Yeah. And they've been around so long now that almost everyone's got a really good Gene story.
Yes, yeah, everybody's got at least one. Exactly.
It runs the gamut in the business too. Like there's some people who just go, "Wow, how would you have a Gene story?" But they do. Like if Rob Thomas had a Gene story, like, wow, okay, but let's hear it. What's that conversation like? Bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk about how, you referenced Cold Sweat and you were doing Cold Gin. And at some point you wanted to be in a band without the word cold in the name.
I did.
So how does contract? Yeah, you're like, no more cold bands. But you ended up with Saigon Kick starting with their second album, which is the one that has the song Love Is On The Way that I think I still hear it at least twice a month on Sirius satellite radio, and the song's still out there. And it was a huge song, a big album, and there was a big tour. So you kind of jump in this big moment. Talk a little bit about what that was like for you. I mean, not to poo-poo 3,000 people in Anaheim in Kiss makeup, but it seems like this was a pretty big moment for that band when you kind of jumped in, right?
It was mainly because they were my favorite band. They literally were. And I'd had The Lizard, it was coming out as I was joining the band. It was being released. I was joining the band. They were actually editing the video for Love Is On The Way. So it hadn't been out maybe more than like 2 weeks-ish, I think. But Friends of Atlantic had gotten me the record back in February. So I already knew the first one. I knew the second one. And when I got the call, like, hey, man, they fired their bass player. Can you be there Tuesday? Send him a package. I was like, yeah. So I walked into that. I was a total ringer. I walked in knowing everything. I knew both this because they said we play both records live. I was like, cool. That means they're a good live band. And I had at that point, I was starving my ass off in LA. I'm trying to find other bands. Cold Sweat had dissolved. Cold Gin was something we did for a while, but I also knew it was fun and I loved hanging around with Gene and Paul. We were in the centerfold of Rip magazine, I think it was. And we didn't give them our names. Anthony and I did because I didn't want to be tagged with the tribute thing because that was at that time because there was no Arnell, there was no Tim Owens, there was no any of these guys who came up from the tribute circuit. pardon me, they just, you know, it was looked down upon, shall we say. So I was like, I'm trying to get
as opposed to now where sometimes the tribute band plays in a bigger venue than the actual band in some cities.
Yeah. It's the farm system, right?
Yeah.
So so I got the call and I go out with Saigon Kick and hang out, and you know, we all get along immediately, which is really important because you're trapped with someone in a steel metal tube with tires for 9 months out of the year. You better get along. You know, it's men in prison. You better watch it. And we did immediately, which was great. But I just loved playing with them, and I was so happy. And they said, "Look, man, I got news for you. We'd love to have you in, but you're the first guy we've auditioned." I'm thinking, how? I mean, you know, they were in Florida. I figured, you know, you're this band here. You got all your friends, because you always go to the friend network first, right? And you go, "Hey, man, you know, we always wanted to get you in the band. Now's your shot." I figured I was like 16th, you know, in line. Nope, I was first. And Jason said, "Look, man, it wouldn't be fair if we didn't audition these other guys, you know, but, you know, you're the front runner." I was like, cool. So I get on the plane and go home, and I seen my now wife, and she said, "How'd it go?" And I told her, and I said, "I'm gonna go to Blockbuster and grab some movies, and I'll come back." Right? Again, dating the conversation.
Right. I was gonna say, just to make this an incredibly 90s conversation. Right. I stopped off at 7-Eleven and grabbed a large Jolt Cola on my way to Blockbuster Video.
Exactly. And I come back and she said, "Jason Bieler called." I was like, because all I'm thinking is, you know, their main dude who was always wanting to get in the band from their neighborhood got and killed it, right? And Bieler says, "Hey, man, how you doing? How's the trip?" I said, "Cool, thanks. How are things?" You know, thinking, here we go. And he says, "They're great. By the way, the gig's yours if you want it." I was like, "Really?" I said, "When do you want me?" He said, "Can you be here Thursday or Friday?" I said, "Yes, I can." So off we went. We rehearsed for about a week, and then we were out on the road. That was June of '92. We didn't come home until May of '93.
Which that's fairly interesting timing, of course, because you know, I know that the band continued to have success internationally in the years that followed, but you come back to the U.S. in the middle of '93, and it hadn't, you know, the bubble hadn't entirely burst, and not that Saigon Kick was a glam rock band. I know a lot of people throw around the term hair band, but it almost didn't matter what you looked like. There was like, what we want is the next Nirvana, the next Soundgarden, and really, you know, as part of that movement, some truly not very good bands got signed, and some great bands put out great albums that a lot of people never heard. You know, it's like that third Skid Row record, that third Warrant record. There's a lot of stuff that people just never heard and still haven't heard to this day. So how did that impact Saigon Kick? I mean, you're able to go out and do some international shows, I'm sure, but you know, contrast that first year in the band with what the next year was like for you.
We hit a lull, to be sure, because Atlantic didn't know what to do with us. Right, because we weren't rock, but we weren't alternative. We were definitely, you know, in hindsight, we were Saigon Kick. You know, that we were our own thing. And I, of course, was like, Jason would say, "No, I got these tunes. What do you think of this one? Do you think it's too weird?" I'm like, "No." "Should we put them both on the same record?" And you know, no. We got a punk song and a samba on the same record, so who cares? You know, Dragon Attack and Another One Bites the Dust are on the game together. So I don't. Madonna and Motorhead are like this in my CD collection. Go ahead. Right. So yeah, it's slowed way down in the U.S. because we were just radioactive. I mean, nobody wanted to touch you just because of the time period. And as you pointed out, the time period I think cost us more than the label, meaning like the stigma, I guess, of that. And so we just did what we did, and we found out through our management that, and it was such a Spinal Tap moment, and we all leapt on it. But we had gone #1 in Indonesia. You know? So Phil calls me and goes, "Sex Foam's gone #1 in Indonesia." You know, so we're just running with it. But it had, and we're like, you know, we're poor geography students, so we should do some. And this is before, you know, these things, so you know, you don't.
You got to spin the globe and be like,
here.
No, no. What about over here?
Yeah, had to go to the library. Yeah. So we're like, there's 250 million people in this country. Like, holy mackerel. So we go over there and it's mayhem. We're playing the same places Metallica played. We have bodyguards. We have 2 or 3 #1 singles. And they're just, at home, Phil and I are working in a video store. Like, what is going on here? So that contrast between, the utter success of the songs, which is sure validation, and it was great to go and play and all that stuff. But then we get home like, we can't get arrested here. What the heck's going on? So it was a little frustrating, but I listened to the material at least, and I go, all right, well, we didn't let it affect, like, we never phoned an album in. We never phoned a song in. We always gave it, what it deserved. And then it's fun 30 years later, have these people tell us, this song was this to us, or my mother was in chemo and we played this for her when she was taking her medicine, or our daughter was born to this because we had our birth at home, or we played this at my son's graduation. And you're just thinking at the time, it's a song on the record. You want people to like it, but you don't realize they've had 25 years to live with it. And it's really humbling.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times, some of it, the public perception was fueled by the visuals. A perfect example is the band Winger, who is a great band from that era, but they had that look. And not only did they have that look, they had Beavis and Butthead going on and talking about how they suck and how they suck so much. The nerdy kid wears a Winger t-shirt while they wear Metallica and AC/DC shirts. Yep. And, and also I think it's either Lars or James is throwing darts at a picture of Kip Winger in the Nothing Else Matters video. So it's like, it almost didn't matter what you put out if you were that band, and then Motley Crue decides that that's a great time to let's change singers, and it was just like, and even like bands like Def Leppard had a problem, and I mean, they were playing arenas, they played arenas again within within less than a decade, but it was like right there, it was like, all right, let's sit this one out for a little while. So how many years does that kind of go on for, that you're able to, and it's funny because you'll hear about bands from that era that never, like a good example is a band like Mr. Big. They never stopped being bad in Asia, and they still will, like, they'll start off in Asia, and the band Wasp played here in the U.S. for the first time in 10 years, but it's not like it was the first time they toured. It was the first time they played in the U.S. So was it a lot of international gigs for the mid to late 90s? Yeah.
Oh yeah. And for us, what's interesting about America as opposed to the rest of the world, if you play in a rock band, you're an artist, and what you do is your art. As opposed to America, where I think you're expected to outgrow it as a musician and as a listener. You still listen to whatever. I listened in high school, whereas in somebody in France, I remember they went to this dissertation of how our stuff evolved from album to album, and it was really good. It was fascinating. I was like, wow, you're into this stuff,
Yeah.
And I think we just had to kind of gut it out and deal with it. But then at a certain point, it just became too much. I'd had a daughter. Well, actually, my wife had a daughter in '96. And I was like, you know what, man, I don't want to be the guy out touring on the road with a daughter at home. I just don't want to do that. So I put it on hold.
I mean, that song's already been written a few times.
Yeah, right. So exactly.
It's well, this cat's in the cradle. It's about a little girl. So
exactly. Kitten's in the cradle. Yeah. So it was a tough decision at the time. And it's funny, you look back, it's like, that was only a 2-year period of really having to like suffer. Whereas now you're like, it was only 2 years. We could have figured something out. But flip side is, I talked to my daughter today and I'm like, you know what? I'm glad I was home. Yeah, I'm not. I have no regrets about that.
No, absolutely. And as I was reading, sort of at this stage, the next thing you do is you kind of get into music licensing for film and television, right? And a few years ago, I talked to I believe his name is Andre Cuomo. Andre Cuomo. He was in the first season of The Real World, so he's the musician in the first season of The Real World. He still does music now, but I talked to him about this very same thing and you know, and it's obviously anybody who watches movies and TV, you might take the moment to go like, oh yeah, there's a lot in there, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously it's big business. It's great for, you know, an up and coming band, of course, but maybe a band that people hadn't thought about in a little while. Their song gets in a movie or on a TV show. It can, I don't know. I mean, you know, getting your song on like the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack probably does more than getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in terms of creating interest, or like, oh my God, you know, I mean, a perfect example. I just mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy. Their trailer for that movie, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, has the Rainbow Since You've Been Gone, which is, you know, it's a Graham Bonnet song. It's like, right. You don't usually think of that Rainbow song, and you're like, oh, this is such a great song, you know? And obviously it's just sort of like connecting the dots with the right person, right? Of like, I have this great song that would work really well for this. Talk a little bit about just getting into that and sort of what that's like, you know, kind of trying to basically it's almost like matchmaking, you know, like,
totally.
You know,
well,
band meet director, you know?
And it was a valuable experience. I got started in it with Eric Gammons, who was a guitar player in Cold Sweat. And Mark Ferrari's like kind of head of everybody and all this stuff. He was licensing music in like 91 or 2, where he just had all these CDs with all these tunes on it. And Mark's just so persistent. And he's such a good salesman. He just go to all the TV and broadcast editing bays and the movies and all, and he would just sell and sell and sell. And then Eric got into it too. And what the trick was, you had to learn how to write for television, because as you pointed out, there's little bits here and there that you don't realize how they have to be written and performed and recorded. Because when you're in a band, you think song, you think cool intro, verse, chorus, solo, chorus, out, you know. This might be, okay, I've got to build it up this way, and it's got to stop twice. One's a cold stop, and then one's a sustained stop. And you don't need a vocal. There's no guys in your band to fight with, so all your ideas can get used, which is fun. And then it's really gratifying to be sitting in the house here, and I'll be in the kitchen, and my wife will be watching something on HGTV, and I'll go, just got paid. And she'll go along a little more, just got paid again. You know, so that's really cool. But like to your point about Guardians of the Galaxy, those musical directors, and I don't know the one who is for that series, but God, they're good. They're just great stuff. But my daughter and son were watching the first one, and I was in the other room, and I'm singing along with everything as it comes on there, and going, "Oh wow, that's a cool." And they're like, "How do you know all this stuff?" I'm like, 5th grade. That's how I know all this stuff.
A lot of that is the director's name's James Gunn. He also did a series for HBO Max, which as of today is just called Max, called Peacemaker with John Cena. And specifically, James Gunn decided that character is really focused on late 90s hard rock. So there's an episode where the entirety of like Faster Pussycat's House of Pain plays in a way where it really fits the story and what he's remembering. Yeah. And I was just like, I was like, oh my God, this is like he raided my tape collection from like 1989, you know? Yeah. And it's you know, there's some artists, you know, some directors that really spend a lot of time, and they have the people they trust. And then sometimes you'll see a movie, you're like, okay, let's take a look. Oh, Warner Brothers put out this movie, Warner Brothers Records. These songs don't fit in the movie, you know. But yeah, it really makes you appreciate it when it's well done, but it also stands out when it's not, you know.
Oh no, totally. Whoever does the musical supervision for The Walking Dead is a real early 80s new wave of British heavy metal fan, because I'll be watching that and going, okay, that's Motorhead, but it's not Ace of Spades, which everyone, you know, now it's iconic. Sure. Everyone loves that song. It's like, no one wanted to hear me play it on my stereo in 1981. They got mad at me. But it was like Chase is better than The Catch, or like Jailbait, or The Hammer. And I was like, well, I said, who's playing Motorhead? And my wife said, it's on Walking Dead. I was like, you know, and then 2 shows later, Saxon, Princess of the Night, I think it was from Denim and Leather. I was like, am I hearing what the, you know? So someone was into it, you know, and it was chosen, like you said, for a reason. And a lot of times they call a temp score, and they'll cut the scene visually to, let's say, Purple Haze. But then they don't want to pay for Purple Haze because it's $1.5 million sync fee. So they get a hold of guys like me and go, can you give me something that sounds a lot like Purple Haze, but not so much that we get sued? Try. Let's see what happens. Yeah. And I have to say, I did it probably a couple dozen times and profited from it nicely, but I only got one cease and desist letter where they said, that's a little close. But what we found out was the music supervisor had gone to the band's management and wanted to say, hey, we want to license this song. And they said 50 grand or whatever. No. And then they hire me and I go, yeah, sure. It was, quote, too close, but they'd already tipped their hand.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they let you know. Yeah, I mean, it's the most famous one of those would be Ray Parker Jr. with the Ghostbusters theme, because they went to Huey Lewis and they said, "Can you give us a song?" And he was just too busy. He had like the biggest album in the world.
Oh, they were huge. Yeah.
And so then Ray Parker Jr. is like, "No worry, I got this." And of course, the Ghostbusters theme sounds a lot like "I Want a New Drug," and to the extent that they had some kind of I don't know, sealed records, whatever you call that, where neither one of them were allowed to talk about it. But all of a sudden, Huey Lewis's name goes on the songwriting credit for the Ghostbusters theme. Just like how the Vanilla Ice song that sampled Under Pressure, all of a sudden it had all the members of Queen and David Bowie listed as songwriters. So, yeah, well, it's like, wait, you gotta, sometimes you gotta change it a little bit more, is what you're saying, Chris.
What I think when they finally got smart about it, instead of wasting money in court suing each other, they just include each other on the writing now. I remember hearing a story about John Lennon when he was getting ready to do rock and roll. Chuck Berry was miffed about something that they had done. It sounded too much like it, whatever it was, and was threatening to sue. And John called him up and said, hey, man, I'm going to put like 3 of your songs on the rock and roll record that's coming out, and that should cover anything you would have lost in royalties, and no lawyers involved, no nothing. And Chuck was like, cool, done.
Yeah, sometimes it's it's just that simple, I mean, you're talking about the new wave British heavy metal. There's bands like, guys who were in a band like Budgie, they have a comfortable living because Metallica did a song of theirs and put it on an album. And it doesn't matter that in the US they no one ever knew who they were, but it's like we got a lot of those nice checks thanks to our friends in Metallica. So
Diamond Head, Blitzkrieg, absolutely. There was another one with Budgie. There's a Budgie song, I think it's called Rockin' Chair.
Okay.
If you listen to it, it's Kiss's 100,000 Years, and you're just kind of like, oh my, It's fun when those things pop up and you're listening like, hey, that sounds kind of familiar. Run that back, and like, oh my God. Apparently there's a Cactus song called Let Me Swim off the first record, and it's essentially Eruption the way it starts. So badly that Carmine Appice got in someone's face and Van Halen was like, you guys got a little close with that,
Yeah, I mean they have there was that big Led Zeppelin were sued by I think the band was called Spirit, that had a song that sounded an awful lot like Stairway to Heaven, and there was just a huge one that it sounded like
Ed Sheeran.
Marvin Gaye, Ed Sheeran, and they said it didn't sound like it, so.
There's guys who are musicologists. We did stuff for Victoria's Secret. And I almost said Victoria Principal. That would have been interesting. Victoria's, sure. Let's do that.
Could have been fun too, though.
Yeah. So we did this. They wanted it exactly like really, really close because they couldn't get the original. And it went to a musicologist who literally analyzed it and said that we were in the clear. So if we went to court, we would pull in this musicologist and said, no, based on this and this and this and frequencies and time signatures and pitches and rhythms, they are not similar pieces. But yeah, there's guys who have and ladies obviously who have gone and testified for musicians in those cases.
Yeah, and I mean, in a lot of cases, there's the person who loses is like, that would have really meant. I mean, the Marvin Gaye estate, I'm sure, has a lot of money coming in. However, it would have been a lot more if that Ed Sheeran song. Well, we could talk about lawsuits and music licensing for another half hour, but I do want to talk about Canal. I want to talk about Crash Burn Repeat, which I believe is the band's second album. Tell me if I'm wrong, though.
No, it'd be the first, and you're close. It's Crash Burn Rebirth.
Oh my gosh, it is. Yeah, you know what? I
Well,
tried
maybe
to
that might
find.
be good for the second record. You know, we'll still call the second record that.
Well, that'll be the, you know how a lot of times the same album comes out with like 2 or 3 new tracks. So that's what it'll be called.
There you go.
Yeah. So, so Crash Burn Rebirth. My apologies. Sorry about that.
No problem. It is the first one, although the second one is written and we are working on it. The third one is 60% written, I'd say, and demoed out. But yeah, Crash Burn Rebirth started as an experiment because I love Thin Lizzy. Revered around the world. Here, everyone knows them as
Boys Are Back in Town.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe Cowboy Song, maybe.
Yeah.
Of course, now we did a gig a while back and played Whiskey in the Jar. And they're like, "Oh, dude, you played the Metallica song." I was like, "No, I didn't. It's Thin Lizzy." So, you know, revered everywhere else in the world. And people just, when you meet the Lizzy fans here, I mean, they're fans, they mean it. And my thought was, you know what? I do so much in TV and film that's all over the map. With Saigon stuff, when we did it, it was a certain way. I have a surf band that does all instrumental. I got 4 records out on that. So it's like, I want to do a rock band. And I thought, well, I'm going to give myself an assignment, which is, can I write an entire record like Thin Lizzy, as if I were to like hand it to him and say, "Hey man, this is all done. All you got to do is just do it." And they wouldn't look at it and go, "Well, that doesn't make sense. And that doesn't, you missed this, you missed that," without sounding like I ripped off Boys Are Back in Town. Like you listen to it and you go, okay, that one's Chinatown, that one's Hollywood, that one's Angel of Death. You're just going to go, you just copied them. So I was like, okay, can you literally do it the way it sounds like the band would do it now? So I didn't want to create like a period piece. Like Lenny Kravitz is so good at creating that sound from 75. I didn't want to do that. I was like, okay, how do I make this sound like now? Like if Thin Lizzy made a record now. And that's how it all started.
Yeah, and there's obviously there's that fine line where if you do that, you could end up with a bunch of songs. It's like, okay, yeah, it sounds very familiar. Are you to bring it back to Kiss? Are you familiar with this band called Classic 78?
Yeah.
And it's such a great idea. It's like, well, what if Kiss kind of stayed together and instead of doing the solo albums and you know, Unmasked and The Elder, what if they did these albums? And it's like, it sounds so much like they would have, and it's a great like what if, you know? But,
love it. But, it's like if they did I think the original one was if they did another Rock and Roll Over.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So
they were much sort of that same idea though, because you don't want something that sounds, you know, just like a song from Rock and Roll Over. You know, you don't want it to be like,
I knew if I tried to recreate the production value from say Giant of the Fox, it'd just be a losing proposition because I'm going to be chasing the way that album should sound, and you weren't there. You're never going to get it. So those guys who did the Kiss stuff were much more ambitious than me in that sense. I just wanted to sound really a lot like Thin Lizzy, feel like it, but like we made the record today.
Does that process start with you know, just getting into like a rehearsal space and playing actual Thin Lizzy songs, or is it all in your head? Like, well, what it's all from the what if point, or do you actually start off like, let's kind of get in the frame of mind and you know, play some of our favorites?
All the what if. I do improv comedy and some acting, and the whole idea of being able to kind of get into the character, like, okay, this is a character. So how do I get in there and think like this? Because you'll be much more effective in your execution if you think like it, as opposed to I'm just going to copy it. Because if you're thinking like it, it's fairly endless. But if you're copying it, you run out of it when the song ends. So we, Colin and I especially, just sat down and said, okay, we kind of want to tune like this. Let's say Bad Reputation. So how do we do it and we don't sound like we're ripping off Bad Reputation? Or we can't do it, you know, like we're not good enough to be in Thin Lizzy. So it started that way. And I think only one of the songs was actually played live, and that's Say Goodbye. So everything else was done in studios and then sending drum tracks back and forth, because there's 4 different drummers on the record. Barry Kurtz from Shinedown, Mark Danzeisen, who was in Little Caesars, probably what most people know for, or the River Dogs. Rick Sanders, who was in Saigon Kick with me, and he was in a band called STA, Super Transatlantic. And then Eric Rickert was in a band called, I think it was Candy Ass, and he was in Action City Blackout and something else. And you know, they all contributed tracks really well, and it kept it sounding fresh because one person wasn't just kind of dominating that field, because we weren't playing gigs, and you didn't have that cohesion you have of playing together gig after gig after gig. So it was cool.
Well, interesting, because we've circled around a couple of times back to Kiss, and now it sort of circles around to Spinal Tap having 4 drummers just on the one album.
All alive, though.
I was going to say, I hope nobody exploded.
No, not yet. Not yet.
No.
It's probably just doomed them.
If that happens, save it for a live show. You know, I mean, that's what you want people to see it. So the song that's out, and I understand that just within the last day or so, there's now a lyric video on the Canal YouTube channel, which I have subscribed to right before I started talking to you, for Take It All. Yes. Talk a little bit about that song. It's the last of the 9 songs on the album. Right. And you know, there's a couple of ways to do a last song on an album. You know, you can do, you know, Home Tonight or You See Me Crying, and you can kind of, you know, just kind of like, all right, let's kind of fade off into the sunset, or you can really amp it up one more time. And I appreciate the latter approach. Not that those 2 songs from Aerosmith aren't great. That's not my point.
Oh, right. But yeah, you go out with a bang. It's like to say you play rock and roll night and you set off all the pyro.
Right, exactly.
The idea was also it's bookends, because the record starts with a gong and then ends with a gong. And with Take It All, I wanted visually the idea of someone like Chris Jericho walking out into in a wrestling arena and just, you know, this is mine, you know, that type of stuff. Yeah. And then when Phil Verone, our drummer on Kick, who's now doing all the great video editing, said, I want to do a lyric video for you. What do you want? What do you hear? And I'm just, I hadn't thought of anything. So I had to kind of read the lyrics, like, what do I see here? Yeah. And I said, think like medieval wars. Think Braveheart. Think, you know, just guys coming into town and just trashing the joint and just taking everything. And being I think I'm 88% Irish. You know, Ireland was invaded time after time after time, and that's, you know, certainly the theme of Emerald, and a couple of other Lizzie tunes. So I was like, you know what? Let's chase it from that angle. Like this is going to be a medieval war, and it's awful, and you've been bred to think that you've got to fight your way through us and fight your way through it, and just there's no turning back. You just got to come in and just get it and get through it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the YouTube channel is just Kinell, Kinell, and the notes reference the band name being short for something, and I wasn't smart enough to figure it out. So I guess people have to think.
You know what it is, though?
I didn't come up with it. No.
Okay. It's is this a family hour, or can I say it?
You can say whatever you want. It's YouTube. So as long as we don't steal someone else's music and put it over on the right side of the screen, we'll be fine.
It's when we were with when I was with Cold Sweat, we were out with Dio, and Dio had mostly a British crew. So when something didn't go right, instead of saying "fucking hell," it was "Canell," you know. And there's this great meme of a guy. There was it's all over Instagram of people putting overlaid video to "In the Air Tonight" by Phil Collins. And when it comes to the big drum fill, they're like, I have a deer walking over a kid's, you know, slide. They have a kid crashing into garbage cans on his bike. But one of them is my favorite. This guy, it's a British dude, and he's got a guitar, and he sits down, he's going to play a guitar and, like, you know, show him up to his girlfriend or whatever. And over he goes. And the first thing he says getting back up is, "Canell!" So it's short for "fucking hell" is what it is.
Which is a great name, and when you do it shortened for that, then you don't have to worry about
it's like you sneak one by the goalie there.
Yeah, right, exactly. You don't have to put the asterisks in the band name. So so that's the song that's out now. And what are the plans in terms of any live shows, any touring, more music? You've mentioned that there's another album and a half pretty much ready to go. Yeah. So what's the rest of 2023 look like for Canell?
We definitely do some live shows. The trick is Barry's obviously out with Shinedown for, you know, the rest of his life. Although I think he's home right now. And Rick Sanders is Barry's drum tech. So that's 2 of the guys out. So I'd have to, the best guy I think would be Rickard, because he's here. I live in Charleston. He lives here. Colin lives here. So doing a live show would be just deciding, what do I do? Do I play guitar or bass on this? And Colin's like, dude, you got to play guitar, because our solos have to sound a certain way. And Then I'm like, yeah, but the bass lines are just so. Then Lizzie's got a certain thing to their bass line, and the drums. So do I do that? And then there's less to worry about, of course. You know, I'm not tapping on pedals and stuff. But then for the rest of the year, it's definitely finish up the second one. I think there's one I'm gonna rewrite. So those 10 are done. And then I have to finish the third one, which is a concept record. And it's a Western ghost story. I think of that.
Nice.
And then there's we got kind of we get kind of bored with what we were doing, in the sense that bored's a bad word. Maybe just kind of burnt out. Like, you know, do we want to do the song again? We have to work on the chorus. We have to this. So we started doing a couple of covers, which became about 8 of them. So we have the possibility of doing like an all covers record, or we just kind of sneak them in here and there.
Right, and you know, also in this day and age, the way that the music industry is now, you can always like, all right, you know what, this second album's taking a little bit longer. Let's put out a couple of those covers so people don't forget about us.
Right.
And you know, it's
right.
You know, it's I think that as not a musician myself, but as someone who consumes music, I think that there's a lot of pros and cons for now versus then. You know, I think that
oh yeah.
You know, in the access, the ability to interact between fans and artists, I think is a lot better. You know, I mean, being informed is, you know, you held up your cell phone before, you know, it was like, you know, you didn't know when somebody left a band until maybe you went to go see that band. You know, I mean, there's you're just saying stories about people going to see Kiss on the Lick It Up tour, and they're like, well, who are these guys? Where's the makeup? You know,
right, right, yeah. We did. You just described my first 2 months with Saigon Kick, because at that point there was a 3-month lead time in rock magazines. So right. I joined, let's say June 1st. No one's going to know about this till end of August. Until
right after the summer, until like, you know, Metal Edge and Hit Parader can get it out there.
Exactly. Yeah, so can you sign this? And they'd be going,
yeah, which one?
Which one's me? I'm like, I'm not on that. So finally, when All I Want came out as a single, my picture was on that. So but yeah, the lead time then was months, whereas today it's seconds. You know, you can have a band photo shoot and boom, you post it in seconds. It's done. It's up. Not then.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And it's
for good or bad. You know, I mean, there's the kind of the fun was for me is like just going out and nobody knew what they were getting hit with. They're just boom, 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 boom. The band was excited.
No, there's not as much mystery as there used to be. You know, like over the weekend, the Foo Fighters rolled out their new drummer, Josh Freese. Yeah. And for months leading up to it, there were like 2 names that people were like, well, we think it might be this guy. And Josh Freese was one of them, you know? So it was like, there's not like the shock that maybe there used to be.
Right, right. Yeah. And with and yeah, Josh, my money was on Josh. I've just figured he was just going to get it, you know?
Yeah, right. I mean, it seems like it, and from what I understand, they did a live stream and they had some fun with it. They had some big name drummers who like Tommy Lee from Motley Crue walks in, and people, you know, think it's going to be him, and now it was all played up for a joke, and stuff like that. And then eventually Josh was like, "Hey, why don't we play?" And then they did like a free stream show. So
good,
it's great. And so yeah, I think. In terms of the ability to interact with bands these days, what's the best way for people to keep tabs? There's the Canal YouTube channel, which is very easily subscribed to. It doesn't cost a thing. It's, you know, all you got to do is basically give the thumbs up, and then all of a sudden you know when there's a new video.
Yes, please. Yeah, and Phil and I were talking about the next one as well. I'd like to do a live one in the studio, probably like me and Colin and Rick are playing some stuff, and maybe I'll switch between guitar and bass during it. But the Bandcamp, we're on Bandcamp, where you can get either the hard copy CD or you can download it. But I think if you buy the CD, you're able to download all the waves anyway. And then I've got an Instagram page for it, but you know, we want to jack it up and get some more content on there. So pretty much the previous choices are mentioned, but I always put stuff on my Instagram page and my Facebook page. Stuff will show up on the Saigon page, and then now as we're kind of rolling out all the publicity for it, we'll probably have a better place to have everyone come in and, you know, have what do they call it, a meeting place or something. There's the term they use for it.
Oh yeah, there's like Twitter Spaces, and there's all these different places you can go. Yeah,
and there's so many, and you're like, well, which one applies to me? You know,
right?
Like looking at Melda Marcos's shoe closet, like, well, you know, where do we start? Now, do these even fit? You know, so but yeah, if you want to go find it, Bandcamp for sure. And I think actually Bandcamp, it does. We did a cover of Out in the Fields by Gary Moore.
Oh, nice.
And where we donate, there's a link where you can donate stuff to the Ukrainian causes. So let's say you didn't want to give it to, I don't know, the Ukrainian Goodwill. You could, there's water, there's abandoned pets, there's you know, kids and stuff for the kids, for clothing, for, you know, diapers and formula, whatever. You can choose your avenue of charity.
Oh, that's great. No, definitely. Well, Chris, it's been wonderful just chatting with you, and you know, I feel like we could have done another 50 minutes just going round and round on a lot of the same things we talked about. But I wanted to make sure that we let people know about the Cannell album, available now, and Crash Burn Rebirth. I don't know who called it Crash Burn Repeat, but that person's been fired. So
they've been canceled.
Yes, they were immediately canceled. And yes, it was very easy to go over to Bandcamp and find a way to listen to the album. And then, of course, as you mentioned, you're doing something that's not very popular in the record industry now. You let people buy the physical copy, which includes the digital tracks, because that used to be the way to do it. But then they realized, well, can't we get people to pay for it twice? If we can sell them, you know, a vinyl for $60, and then also all the tracks for like $12. So,
but what's funny is if you take a suggestion from the music, or sorry, from the movie and TV industry, which, I mean, I learned a lot that was transferable, a lot of cross-pollination there. But think of how many DVDs you can buy that have a digital copy, or they have a DVD and it's Blu-ray and just regular DVD now. You know, and they don't blink twice or think twice. They just give it to you. I was like, well, it's not like it's cost. You know, WAV files don't have any physical inventory. You know, I'm not stacking them up going, I got to move these things. You know, it's a server somewhere. You know? Yeah,
you have like a public storage locker filled with WAV files and MP3s.
Right.
You know,
and they're heavy. Yikes.
Well, Chris McLernon, I really appreciate it. As I said, everybody check out Cannell. And for our audio audience, you will get to hear a little bit on the way out here at the end of the show. We appreciate all that. Please follow us at Bladtcast, BLADTCAST, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. And thanks again to Chris, and we'll see you next time on the Bladtcast. Thanks again.
Thank you.